So let's obviously talk about COVID. What is your latest understanding of just how much damage the pandemic has done to the average child's education?
Yeah, that's such a good question because so many people have lots of things to say about this. But what I did was in April and May, just as the children were coming out of lockdown, I went out and did a survey of them. In fact, it's turned into the biggest survey in England. Marcus Rashford helped me launch it. We've had over 500,000 responses, and the children have told us some really interesting things. They've told us that they really miss school. That how much they actually realized they liked school, fancy that, and how much they really valued the support of their teachers, especially the most vulnerable. 98,000 of those children who responded had additional needs. You know, they were talking about how much they miss their teachers' support in terms of reading, writing, learning. Now, what the kids are telling us is exactly what the teachers are telling us, that they need to catch up. They're worried about catching up, particularly those going into exam years, that they are really concerned, and they want, you know, they want all the help they can. But we've got a bigger problem. We've got children who haven't made it back to school as well. So I think there's an issue with attendance as well, and emotional well-being of young people that I think we should talk about.
Are you able to quantify, I mean, there is no average, is there? Are you able to quantify some of the worst cases, for example? Those disadvantaged children we know have suffered more than others. They've had less access to online schooling at home and the like. Are you able to put in months or even years the amount of time?
Yeah, so I think there have been some really good estimates of you know, up to 12 to 14 months of learning loss. Now, what I would say is first, don't panic, because head teachers and schools, and particularly, I mean, I used to be an academy leader and lead schools where children had not had the best education, and we can catch children up. We know how to do it, but we need, in terms of catch up for their lessons, we need to make sure we've got them in front of a good teacher for enough time. So there's that very practical bit about catch up, and that's where actually extra lessons, catch up, and tutoring come in. We've got time to do that, but there's another place that we need to look at, which is their emotional well-being. And I think as I read those children's survey responses, and as I went around the country, I mean, just at that coming out of lockdown point, I went everywhere from Gateshead to Bolton to Wythenshawe to Bristol, right around the country, and talked to absolutely hundreds of children. And they told me a story of that feeling anxious, feeling concerned about making friends, feeling worried about, quite sort of having quite high levels of anxiety. So I think, as well as that practical catch up, there are some other things we can do as well. And that's, you know, look after their emotional well-being and look after their mental health. 20% of young people, in our survey response, the biggest sort of problem they came up with coming out of lockdown was their own mental health and well-being. Now, how do we deal with that? I think in lots of ways. So I think there's both all those after school clubs, getting kids back together. You know, that's why I really am fond of arguing for the longer day, so that the activities they need to do to actually be together get put on. But also, you know, being serious about counselling, and particularly digital counselling. Kids told me they liked. They want to have someone to talk to at school to help them. And they were particularly keen about the rollout. They were particularly keen about getting the counselling and support they needed. And I've argued for the NHS to hurry up and roll out the mental health support teams. I've made a big pitch of that. So there's a counsellor in every school. And today, the head of the NHS has said that she is rolling out 112 new mental health support teams across areas. And I'm really pleased to see that, because I was pushing hard for that.
Well, that's great news. Let's talk about the practicalities per se in the classroom, because next week it's the budget and the spending review as well, two on the same day. That is absolutely the moment that the government really can prescribe actual solutions in terms of pounds and pence to solving this huge problem. Let's divide up into two parts, because we'll talk about COVID catch-up in a second, because of course there is still the issue of actual in-year school funding. COVID aside, now we know that the school population is increasing. We know more kids need to be taught. It's your view, I believe, that school funding, totally aside from COVID, needs to increase in real terms simply to keep up with that pressure of numbers.
Absolutely. And that I think you've explained it beautifully there. We just need to make sure that certainly, I think I want us to be ambitious. We don't want funding to go backwards. We actually want it to get better. And I'm
can you put a number on it?
So, I mean, we're talking about the entire funding regime, but I think very simply, we need it to be equal or better than it is. And I think we should have that ambition. And I've written to the Chancellor. I'm really keen on this. I think everybody's asking for the same thing. I'm confident we're going to get this.
So this is basically a multi-billion-pound increase in the school's budget in real terms.
Yeah, but that's just related to the numbers of children that are in school and need education. And I think we shouldn't think about it as putting more money in. I think we should think about it as investment in the long term in our young people. So I think absolutely as a baseline, we need to be doing this one.
By how much does the budget need to go up by, the school's budget?
I haven't got the figure in my head. Let's just say the economists can work this out, but it absolutely has to at least stay level or increase, not go backwards.
In real terms.
In real terms, yeah.
Let's talk about the COVID catch-up then. Obviously, that is a huge issue and not an uncontroversial issue as well.
Yeah.
You've called for in your big answer, which was the response to the Big Ask survey. And I think, by the way, we didn't discuss this, but that was the biggest survey conducted on children ever. You had over 500,000 respondents.
So 557,000 responses from 151 all local authorities, 6% of 4 to 17-year-olds. It's massive, biggest survey in the world.
What exactly would you like to see happen then? Now, you've talked about, I think, a comprehensive 3-year catch-up package, haven't you? What does that look like?
Well, let's break that down into some very simple things. So I'm really pleased with the money that's already gone into tutoring. What I'm keen because we know tutoring works, it's evidence-based.
And we know the government spent roughly 2 billion so far on tutoring.
Right, exactly. Now, my view is keep going with that, but also, if necessary, we've got to get that tutoring to the places that need it most. It's my friends who are head teachers in rural Cumbria find it very hard to sort of go out and procure those tutors. So we need to either get that tutoring there, or we need to give the schools the funds to make it happen themselves. So very keen on tutoring. I'm very keen on the extended day. Now, lots of schools and trusts are doing the extended day really well. Lots of our kids benefit from the catch-up classes, the drama, the music, all the things they do together in that time. When I went around the country, I saw, and I knew this anyway, I saw some schools who are struggling and not able to do that. They're the ones that need funding to stay open longer. We shouldn't have schools closing at 2:30. I want those schools open for children to actually do the activities they need. Now, again,
when should they close?
Sorry?
If they shouldn't be closing at 2:30, when should they close?
Well, I would love, certainly in schools, I've always run that extra hour at the end of the day, sometimes even longer. So, personally, I'd like to see schools open, to be able to provide that wraparound care, tea time, homework, and all the activities.
What's that, 5 p.m.?
And I think it's doable. Lots of schools do this.
So 4:30, 5 p.m., your ideal?
Definitely. I think that would feel quite normal.
Okay, that extra half hour, I think Kevin Collins asked for an extra half hour on the day. You're perhaps maybe looking for even longer. But that was the thing that ran into the most trouble in government, wasn't it? The Department of Education proposed it, we believe. The Treasury knocked it back because they said there just isn't the evidence there at all that this is the solution. What they think might be happening is that those kids with pushy parents, they're the ones who will send their kids into school and take up with extra time. And the kids without pushy parents won't benefit at all. And they might be the ones who need it most.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I said lots of schools are doing this already. They don't need the extra funding. They're doing their work, doing it within their budget. For me, it's those schools in the most disadvantaged areas, or those schools that are not yet good, that we need to support to do this. And it's going to take some hard work and thought about how to do it. But I don't think we need to fund the whole nation. Most of our schools are doing this anyway, but we need to look at those in most need and deal with those.
Because the problem is, of course, kids who might most need this help, whose parents aren't forcing them into it, you can't force them to stay that extra half an hour or hour? Or can you? Should it be mandatory?
Well, I mean, I certainly, again, as someone who's been a head teacher for 15 years plus, I mean, often we would consult parents, extend the day, and it would be mandatory. So, I mean, I think every head teacher knows what's right for their school and their place, or certainly, the families of schools they work in know what's right. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity that if many students are getting, we surely want for the most disadvantaged. So, I'm very supportive of this, and I think heads are too.
So it is worth looking at extending the school day.
Yeah, definitely.
Mandatorily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think heads, I think heads need to make the decision about what's right for their schools, but they may well decide all their children are staying and it's mandatory for their children, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, sure. Perhaps not something the government legislate for. Now, look, this really is the problem that the Treasury ran into with Kevin Collins' rise. Kevin Collins resigned because, as you know, asking teachers to stay longer in the day costs, and that is the single biggest problem with the proposal. It costs a lot of money. Maybe not every school, because some are already able to pay their teachers to stay longer, or they're just staying longer anyway. But a lot of schools will need a lot of extra money, and that's just extra money the Treasury aren't prepared to pay for.
Well, first off, it doesn't always need to be teachers, does it? There are. I mean, I've run extended days with youth groups, with volunteers, with in lots of different ways. So, and I think now we're much more sophisticated about how we do our timetables. I mean, so that we can make sure the timetables work. I don't see those things as problems at all. Yes. Yeah, obviously the funding is the issue with the Treasury, but I think it's worth a battle on this one. For those particularly that are not doing it, I don't want to see kids going home at 2:30 when they could be doing sport, drama, catch up. And I mean, when we were coming out of COVID, I spoke to a number of neuroscientists, and particularly Sarah Jane Blakemore at Oxford University, and I said to her, what would help teenagers' sort of well-being, mental health, and get them back to normal? And she said, good quality relationships, spending time together. And I think the extended day plays to that, and that's good evidence for the Chancellor.
Okay, the overall package now for all this catch-up we've been discussing, and that has also been the topic of furious debate in government really over the last sort of year or so. Kevin Collins, we know, asked for around 15 billion. Now, this programme understands that the Department for Education has submitted, certainly in the recent past, a bid for catch-up between 5 and 10 billion. We don't know what the Treasury are going to say. For you, what sort of figure are we talking about? Yeah,
so I was very supportive of a recent package that looked very much like I was asking for, put forward by Jeff Barton of Askell and some multi-academy trust leaders, that came in around 5 billion. So I think that seems like a really sensible figure. But no amount of money is ever going to be enough in some ways. What I would say is, I would like to see
minimum. Would you say 5 billion benchmark?
Well, that's that package. That's very much like the package I've asked for, and I think that seems really sensible. But what I would say is the important thing is that we put children at the centre of recovery from the pandemic, and it's investment. And we need to be funding the right things, the things that will work. And we need to look at children in the round. And I think now's the time. So come on, let's do it. Is my point.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about COVID today. Coronavirus is still extremely prevalent in the country. Cases are going up, as we all know. Now, nowhere are they highest than in the 10 to 19-year-old age group. Do you have some hope that the half term that most schools are now into will act as a firebreak and reduce that caseload?
Yeah, obviously we hope for that. And obviously every child's well-being and every child's physical health is really, really important. And of course the figures are concerning. I get an update on the figures every week. I've been watching the Scottish situation going before us, and let's hope. I mean, I was looking at some hopeful figures that were showing we've reached a peak and things are going to get better. So fingers crossed.
Are you worried about the number of children who are still out of school at the moment because of COVID, not just because of half term?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
get excluded. So I think in the summer they went up to 1 million, didn't it? And it's now dipped again, but it is rising. It's getting close to 300,000 school people simply not able to go to school because they've got COVID.
Yeah, and I'm worried about attendance overall as well. So I think there's the COVID issue, but there's also I'm concerned that attendance overall nationally is down. And one of the things I'm doing with my office over the next few weeks, and I've been working on this since the start of summer, because I think, if you're not attending at school, the most vulnerable can't be looked after, if kids can't learn. So I'm going to do some work with local authorities and trusts, drilling down into their figures to find out exactly where these children are, because I'm worried we're getting ticks just saying attendance on the coding, but have these children come back? Who are they? Who's really looking at them? So I think that's a very important point.
Let me also ask you finally about the vaccine rollout. Are you frustrated by how slow the pace of the rollout has been in schools for 12 to 15-year-olds? And do you know why it's happening so slowly?
I don't know why. I think there's been a step change this week, hasn't there? Because vaccines are allowed to be offered in different sites, and I'm hopeful that uptake will increase there. And I think, one of the things when I talk to children as we were coming out of lockdown, especially teenagers, were very keen to be vaccinated. I know that's anecdotal. I actually don't have a survey figure on how many wanted a vaccine, but anecdotally, a lot of them talked about wanting to be vaccinated so they could A, get back to normal, but B, actually very altruistically wanted to protect the older adults in their lives and older relatives and all of us generally. So I hope that the new arrangements can mean that things can speed up for those who want it. It still has to be a very careful decision between parents and children.
And finally, the White House this week over in the States announced that they're going to press ahead with not just vaccination for teens, but also 5 to 11-year-olds. They're quite confident that it's going to be safe. They're waiting for the green light from their regulator, but they're all ready to go and now preparing. Would you like to see that here?
Well, what I'd like to do is what I always do is take the medical advice. So I think we need to hear what science says. I think if the US goes first, it will be really, it's good for us to actually see the outcome of that. And I think on balance, I always would advise that we take scientific advice.
Well, Pfizer say it's safe. They've already declared their jab as safe.
Yeah, and I would always listen to our CMO, our Chief Medical Officer, and take advice from there.